Greetings, Cap fans, and welcome to episode 256 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I'm Rick Verbonis, and I'm your host, and I've got a co-host. You know his name. It's Bob Lucius, the best gosh darn one out there. Oh, Bob. These go to 11.
Rick, Spinal Tap.
You got it.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Of
Yes.
Of course.
Spinal Tap. Yeah,
Yeah.
Bob. So I'm so glad you've seen the movie.
Yeah. Old movie back from the 80s.
Yeah. No, it was a fantastic movie.
Mhm.
One of the earlier mockumentaries. And it's my sense of humor, right? I love dry, not over the top, not in your face, just very dry humor.
Right.
And Christopher Guest, Michael McKean, man, they were fantastic on this. And Bob, why am I greeting you with a Spinal Tap quote?
Because you'd rather have a Spinal Tap than read a book, Rick.
You know me well.
I do.
You do know me well.
Yeah.
No, the sequel's coming out in just a couple of days. Yeah, if you're listening to this on September 10th, 2025, when it comes out, the sequel's coming out in a couple of days. I'm actually very excited about it.
Well, I am too now because I could have swore there was a sequel years ago. So if there's a sequel coming out, I'm all over that because I have tried to use that. It goes up to 11 on my son on a number of occasions, and that pop culture reference goes over his head. So maybe if there's a movie coming out, I can get him interested in seeing the original and then going to see the sequel in the theater.
It'd be fun. Yeah. But Bob, why am I greeting you with this quote though?
I have no idea.
Okay. What Spinal Tap was directed by?
Was it Rob Reiner?
Yes. And we actually have, I'm sorry, Rob Weiner on the show today. That's who we have. It's Rob Weiner. Sorry to get everybody excited.
Yes.
But we're excited for Rob Weiner.
Yeah.
No, because he is an editor and co-writer on a Captain America book that we are very excited to talk about today. So,
excellent. I am super excited to talk to this editor. I've read this book before a couple times. Looking forward to asking some questions.
Absolutely, yeah. It's always fun having a conversation with someone who knows the Captain America character so intimately and has done so much research on it, and just to talk about different ideas and thoughts on it. So we're going to be getting to that today. But Bob, we also have another guest today. We have something we call a nightcap. And that is when we have one of our super soldier patrons join the show and talk a little bit about their interest in Captain America, and they pick the topic. And so today we have none other than Steve Rogers.
What?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Bob. Sure appreciate being here.
Great to have you here, Steve.
It's going to be fun.
Now, Steve, we love you, but I think there was a lot of people who just got their hopes up, and then you came on camera.
Yeah, I didn't get the super soldier formula. I got the super pudgy, graying, balding formula.
I'm not far behind you, my friend. Steve's actually been on the show before because he was on. Was it episode 200 where you did the voice of the Cobra?
King Cobra.
Yeah. Has your voice recuperated since then? Because you had that raspy voice.
I did that hissing voice. I'm not sure I can do that again.
Yeah. No, you were great. And so Steve, when we say pick the topic, Steve actually introduced us to Rob Weiner and was able to help us get him as a guest on the show. So kudos to Steve for that.
Thank you. That was fun. I'm looking forward to talking to him. I've never met him other than email, so I'm looking forward to talking to him.
First of all, I got to ask, because it's killing me, Rick. Tell me your parents' names aren't Sarah and Joseph.
No, they're not. They're not.
Doggone it.
Sorry about that. My dad one time I figured out my dad was 11 years old when Captain America #1 came out, and he said it probably passed through his hands at some point. And I asked him if he remembered that name when it came time to name me. Nope, just a lucky
Just a
coincidence.
lucky coincidence.
Yeah.
Ah.
Doggone it.
I don't know. I mean, I guess as a kid, if I got that comic and I'm 11 years old, I mean, that's an impressionable age. And I
Yeah.
saw that they had the same last name. I mean, Rogers, not exactly you've met a few Rogers in your life, right? It's not exactly a really hard name to come across, but still, if a character I liked had the same last name, I think that would be pretty cool.
In fact, I went to high school with another Steve Rogers. So there were two of us in my high school. He became a minister, and you can find him online as Pastor America.
Wow. I guess you could have gone either way. You could have gone with the Steve Rogers Captain America collection, like you see behind you, or just like a Mr. Rogers collection.
Yeah, well, I hear that from time to time too. So
Both good. Both,
that's
both,
right. That's right.
both top quality.
Happy
Yeah.
with both.
I'm pretty sure both of them can lift up Thor's hammer.
There you
That's
go.
probably true. Yeah, I'm sure Fred could do it too. That's a good
Yep.
point.
Yeah. So, Steve, tell us a little bit about how you became a Captain America fan. I mean, if you have the name Steve Rogers, it almost would be a default to do that. But was there something about the character that really interested you? Like, how did you get involved?
So I became a Captain America fan from Playboy magazine of all things. So when I was a
Do
kid,
tell.
when I was a kid, again, comic books were kind of nerdy, and I was more of a DC fan. Loved Legion of Superheroes, and it seemed like whenever I would go to the store, I would get the first part of a Marvel story and not the second part, and they had so many continued stories, and so I just sort of got frustrated and really didn't ever get into Marvel, and kind of outgrew comics. And then we moved and got a new house, and the fellow who owned the house before us left a stack of Playboy comics, and I guess my dad was sort of open-minded and left them there. And so in the October 1965 issue, there was an article by Jules Pfeiffer called The Great Comic Book Heroes, which was later expanded into a book. And I actually did read the article. And and it said in there that, Captain America, Steve Rogers. I thought, well, man, that is cool. But it was clearly about World War II comics. And so it just never occurred to me that it was still being published. So one day in high school, I stopped at a 7-Eleven to pick up a Slurpee or something and looked at the spinner rack and saw a copy of Captain America #151. And uh, picked it up and thought, oh, okay, this is Steve Rogers. And so I started reading Cap, and then I started picking up a few more Marvel comics and started picking up DC comics. And I've just been a comic book collector for 50 something years now. And again, yeah, the name coincidence was a lot of fun. But it was the same things you guys talk about on the show all the time, the character qualities that we all aspire to. And so if we talk about the real Steve Rogers, we're going to talk about the one that's on paper and on film and in people's hearts and minds for all these years.
Now, I thought you were going to say that after you read that article, you went down to the drugstore and you picked up the next issue of Playboy, and you continue to do so in case there was ever another article about Captain America.
No,
Just in case.
I was still in high school. I was probably, I don't know what the age is. And I know back then Playboy was under the counter. So I probably would have been too embarrassed to ask for one.
Yeah, right.
I know, right? Yeah, and they had their own comics in the magazine.
That's true.
What was that?
Little Annie Fanny.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Good memory.
Sorry, kids. I'm sorry to say I remember that, but talking to my own kids.
So, Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, where do you live? What do you do?
So, grew up in Lubbock, went to Texas Tech, where the fellow we're going to talk to, Rob Weiner, is a professor there. Worked for Southwest Airlines for some years, worked for Marriott Hotels for some years, was director of security at a Marriott hotel here in San Antonio, and met some, very interesting people. Norman Schwarzkopf was one, Ted Turner, Jane Fonda, escorted them in an elevator one time. So it was some interest. Oh, I actually rode in an elevator with first President Bush one time when he was in town for some sort of a summit meeting. So that was interesting. But about the last 30 years or so, I've been in a family business. My wife's dad started in the self-storage industry. So my wife and I are owners and managers of 7 Alamo mini storage locations in Central and South Texas.
Ah, very nice. And you've been doing that for 30 years. When you
Hmm.
plan to retire?
I don't know. I mean, it's so you have been a small business owner. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of people think the owner sits back and just counts money all day long, but I know you know different.
Yeah.
The owner is works just as hard sometimes, and is not if not harder for his than his employees. But
And
we have brought
sometimes makes less. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But we have brought our son and daughter into the business, and so we're kind of hoping to be able to kind of pass that on to them at some point in the not too distant future.
All
Have you
right.
have you ever had a find in an abandoned storage?
I have come across some comic books. There's a state law though, if that we have to auction it off.
Ah, yeah,
And then
yeah,
it typically doesn't come anywhere near what they owe us. Um, but I have seen occasionally, long boxes left in a unit.
sure. Yeah, my brother had gotten into that. I don't know if he still does it. He has a consignment store up in Vermont, and
Oh yeah,
he
yeah.
loves driving around and doing the auction thing. And
Hmm.
95% of the time he gets nothing. But
Right, right.
but
Added mother load.
yeah,
That's what
I
they hope
can't wait
for.
to retire so I could do that. Like just I used to, after I sold my comic book store, I would buy and sell comics online, and I would go and buy collections, from people, and then kind of like cherry pick and sell those online, and then bulk the others, and that was fun. And then I started this podcast, and I kind of ran out of time.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Just add another day to the week, Rick. How hard can that
Is
be?
that all it takes? Ah, ah.
So
Thank you for doing it.
is there a particular writer or artist, something that really rings your bell, Steve, that jumps
So the
out?
golden age for me is I think the first issue I got came in about 1972, so it's the 70s because it
Okay.
was very shortly after I started buying and collecting Captain America that the Cap of series came out, kind of the
Mhm.
first retcon before there was the word retcon, and I really enjoyed that. And so most of what I started getting deep into was the 70s, but I always enjoyed Mark Waid. I know you guys have interviewed him and talked about him.
Mhm.
Um, Relatively short Stern and Burn run, that was great. Over the years, there's several different ones, but the golden age, quote unquote, golden age for me was
Yeah.
sort of the 70s.
Now, do you still read?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a pull list at the local comic shop. It's Captain America and Spider-Man, but I'll typically go look at what the new issues are, and then I'll pick up kind of a variety of stuff. So, yeah. So I'm still reading, and I'm still about floppies. I have very few collections.
I'm the same way.
So,
I still get
yeah,
the monthly floppies.
yeah.
Yeah, and even though I'm one of those, I save up to read a story arc, so I
Hmm.
might
Hmm.
as well get the collection in the trade. But
Right, right.
old habits die hard.
That's true. Very true.
Rick likes the ads.
Well,
I'm still trying to save up for that X-ray glasses, Bob.
Yeah, right. When I retire, I'm finally going to sign up for that self-defense course.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
forward of that.
The what is it? The course that made a man out of Mac, the Charles Atlas course.
Well, that one
Yeah.
too. Yeah, yeah, I could probably
Yeah.
use that.
Steve, I have to say, I want to bring up, you have these amazing business cards, and you sent me a stack, and I've sent out a few, to our patrons of the show, and by the way, if you want to get more information about being a patron of the show, just go to buymeacoffee.com/Cap Comic Fans to learn more about benefits, and one of them is, as a super soldier, you get to again come on the show and pick the topic. But Steve has this business card, and it's a honorary Avenger card. So it's really cool. It's got the Avengers logo. It's got Cap's shield on there, and it says for
Meritorious.
okay. I don't have my readers on. Sorry.
Let me want me to hold it for you, Rick?
Yeah, hold on. Oh, here it is. For meritorious service to the USA, the Earth, and the Milky Way galaxy. And there's a line there. You could sign someone's name. Is hereby appointed an honorary Avenger with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities pertinent thereto by order of Captain America Steve Rogers. And only Steve Rogers can send this out. So well done, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
It's so outside of a comic shop, maybe half a dozen times in my life before the MCU would people mention the Steve Rogers connection. It was pretty rare. Once the MCU came out, it became a lot more common. And so when people would mention that to me, I would say, well, I'll make you an honorary Avenger. And then I thought, well, let's put it in writing. It'll be so much fun to give these cards out. A couple of, and most people are just really think it's a fun deal. The very first one I gave out was to a pharmacist at the Walgreens, and he kind of looked at me funny. But other than that, most people have had a lot of fun with it. I was at a bar one time and ordered a beer, and the fellow behind the bar mentioned it when I gave him my credit card, and he looked at this little card. And he says, "This is better than graduating from college."
Oh,
No,
wow.
young man. No, young man. It is not. But I appreciate the sentiment.
Has there ever
And
been?
then
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
I was just say another time we went. My wife and I went to Cracker Barrel, and so we got put on the waiting list on the app, and we got there, and the young lady saw my name and said something about it, and so I gave her one of the little cards. And then as we were walking to the table, she turned to my wife and said, "So, are you Black Widow?" And we had spent the day with our grandson, and I said, "No, no, no." But we spent the day with our grandson Bucky, and she looked, and I said, "No, not really. His name is Miles." But
Oh, that would have been awesome.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you: Has there ever been a time, Steve, when you have leveraged the name Steve Rogers for some benefit?
oh, I can't. No,
No, get
no,
a dinner
no. Other.
reservation, a
Oh,
restaurant
no, no, no,
reservation,
no,
or
no,
no?
nothing like that.
Oh, I'd be
Just
using that thing left and right. I don't know
Just a
about
lot
you.
of fun.
Yeah.
Just a lot. Well, I mean, when I walk in, they would obviously not believe me. So
Yeah. Well, I'd use it. In fact, I use Rick's name all the time. So
Yeah,
well, I'm
yeah.
sure that helps.
I
Yeah.
get you should hear the phone messages I get left. All right. Well, speaking of better than graduating college, we should probably have Professor come on to the show. He's been waiting in the green room a little too long. Should we bring him on, gentlemen?
absolutely,
Yes,
let's do
sir.
it.
That'd be great.
Robert G. Weiner is a popular cultural librarian at Texas Tech University. His work has been published in several journals, including the Journal of Popular Culture, Public Library Quarterly, Journal of American Culture, International Journal of Comic Art, Popular Music, and Society, among others. And he has authored, edited, and co edited over 15 books. Too many to mention here, but they include The Supervillain Reader, The Joker, critical essays of the Clown Prince of Crime, Web Spinning Heroics, critical essays on the history and meaning of Spider Man, all three with Robert Moses Peasley, Marvel Comics into Film, essays on adaptation since the 1940s with Matthew McKinney, and graphic novels and comics in the classroom with Carrie Simma. He's also contributed chapters to other collections, including a fantastic exposition on the Captain America and superhero teams in World War II and the Cold War in B.J. Orepeza's The Gospel According to Superheroes, Religion and Popular Culture. And chapters including one on Captain America for the 2-volume Icons of the American Cult comic book from Captain America to Wonder Woman. In addition to research and writing, Rob is also a professor for the Honors College at Texas Tech, where he teaches a required first year course on the power of comics, the cultural value of sequential art. Today, we're going to talk with Rob about his best known book, at least for Cap fans, his 2009 Captain America and the Struggle of the Superhero. He both edited and contributed to this volume of 17 critical essays touching on various pop culture facets of our favorite shield slinger. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great to have you here, Rob.
Good to have you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So we're going to dig into the Captain America and the Struggle of the Superhero, the critical essays, in a few minutes. But first, we want our listeners to get to know you a little bit better. And you're clearly a fan of Captain America, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about your first encounter with the character and what made you become a fan.
My first encounter with Captain America was through Avengers #4. Somehow I got a hold of a reprint and read it when I was very young, and the cover of that issue kind of stuck with me, and the story of Rogers, Captain America, being frozen in ice and coming back. So that's my first memory. I'm also a huge fan, I might add, of the Avengers stories featuring Cap's kooky quartet with Quicksilver, Hawkeye, and the Scarlet Witch.
What was it about Cap that you liked so much?
Well, in part, the fact that Captain America has a nobility about him that you don't see in a lot of popular characters. Um, he's not quite the Boy Scout that Superman is, but he stands for everything America should represent. I mean, he's dressed in the American flag, truth, justice, and the American ideal, as I've been heard to say many times. And part of it too is because I had friends who would make fun of me for liking
Mm-hmm.
Captain America, arguing that Captain America was a government stooge. And I was like, no, Captain America represents the principles of the founders, but there have been occasions, Civil War, Secret Empire, the Captain, etc., where Captain America has stood up for individual liberty and does not represent truth, justice in the American way, but represents what America can be, not what it always is sometimes. And he has gone against um, certain regulations that have been placed upon him, especially, in the Civil War story, standing up for individual freedom and privacy.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Because I know I've said on the show, and maybe I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that, where you said that your fellow comic fans made fun of you for liking Cap. I feel like there's always a hierarchy no matter where you go, right? Like comic nerds got made fun of by everybody else, but within comic nerdom, I think Cap fans got made fun of. You know, crap travels downhill, as they say.
Yeah.
So, Rob, do you have a favorite Captain America story? Maybe something that resonates with you as a fan or maybe as a scholar of popular culture?
Well, there are a number of them. Oddly enough, I really like Captain America Weird Tales 74, where Cap has to fight the Red Skull in hell. And he beats him and gains his freedom out of hell. I just think that's just such an awesome story. Um, but one of my personal favorites is Mark Waid's Man Without a Country, where Cap literally has to, he's given a directive by the president, but the US will not give him any support. He's doing the work that he's supposed to, and he's got to do it as an outsider, even though he's obeying the orders of the president at the time. So that story really resonated with me. And of course, Englehart's Secret Empire, the works of J.M. DeMatteis in Captain America, the whole Populist Party story where they're trying to run Cap for president. I really like Mark Grunwald's various takes, Streets of Poison. Um, there's so many others. Oh, and I really like Jack Kirby's bicentennial battles. And I think that's been reprinted now, but certainly for the US's 250th, Marvel should take a clue and reprint that series, and maybe a collection of patriotic Captain America stories going back to the Golden Age to today.
Rob, I love that you pulled out Captain America's Weird Tales number 74, because you don't hear that one a lot. And and it's funny because I mean it's a great story, right? Because the
Yeah,
Red
it is.
Skull manages to get Cap down in hell, and only one of them can leave, and they got to fight it out. And it's not a story that a lot of people know, and it's one of the more expensive. If you're into Golden Age Cap books, that's one of the more expensive ones to grab, because of course it's the last one featuring Captain America in the Golden Age. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't own a copy of it, but I've got reprints of it
right,
and
yeah.
access to the story. So um I love it. And I think it's real interesting that Gene Thompson, MD, was listed as consultant on that issue.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So even before the Comics Code, they tried to present at least certain comics with a somebody who would be considered legit in the wider outside world
right, right.
as a consultant.
Well, speaking of giving a due credit, so before we get into the meat of Captain America and the struggle of the superhero, I want to talk to you about your dedication for the volume, because
Oh,
it is arguably one of the most extensive dedications I have ever seen. And I think
that's
most readers will be familiar with. So not only does it have this long list of historical figures and a who's who of Captain America creators that I think most people would recognize. I mean, it's got everybody. It's got Millard Fillmore, the 13th president of the United States, and Led Zeppelin. So I got to
yes.
ask you. Oh, and I should note, it does close with "For all the Sentinel of Liberties out there, whoever you may be." So great call out to all those Cap fans out there. But it's a labor of love, and I got to ask you, how did you assemble that dedication?
Well, I don't know how I got away with it with the publisher, because those are not the kind of dedications they usually allow for. I doubt, the book is over 15 years old, and I doubt I could get away with that again. The Millard Fillmore thing is interesting because on my mother's side, we're distant relatives to Millard Fillmore. So,
And Led
you know,
Zeppelin?
no,
No.
I just, Led Zeppelin is one of my favorite bands.
Oh,
So,
yes.
you know,
Awesome.
I worked in the music industry, local music industry for many years. Um, been to over 1,000 concerts, and music is an important part. And in fact, on archive.org, there is a Captain America musical available
Is there really?
that somebody wrote. I
Oh,
don't know if
wow.
it's still there, but there was um, at least 10 years ago on archive.org. Somebody composed their own, and it may be a good person to get on the show at some point, their own creative musical based around the early Captain America comics.
Well,
I smell a future episode right
I know, right? I mean,
there. Me.
I know. Wow. Thanks for the heads up on that. We're gonna have to
Yeah.
start researching.
And there's also a video that somebody did, James, I can't remember, it's been so long, but it's listed in my book, where as a kind of thesis type special project, he hired an actor to tell the complete story of Captain America, James Leonard, um, for an hour and a half, even going into the William Burnside Captain America, the Commie Smasher of the 50s, which doesn't get talked about a lot either.
Just want to get a little bit deeper into the book. So and it's been over 15 years, so you may not recall, but um, in the introduction as well, you wrote that the book was, at least in part, a reaction to the death of Steve Rogers and his replacement by Bucky Barnes as Captain America. And we realize this is basically the second half of the volume 5 by Ed Brubaker. Um, and at the time, you called this turn of events a cheap shot, and you explained, your reasoning for it. It's been 15 years, so in retrospect, has your judgment of these events changed at all?
No, um, I one of the things that people the general public who don't read comics regularly or graphic novels make fun of, especially about DC and Marvel, is that nobody does. Don't kill your IP. It's bad storytelling. Yes, I know the issues sell, but they're going to come back at some point. So, I think it's sloppy storytelling. You just don't kill your IP. Don't go that route. I think it's bad storytelling.
I mean, it's pretty common though, right, these days.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
too common, and people make fun of it who are not comic book fans and say comics are stupid. Nobody ever dies, and I think that just don't kill your IP, whether it's a villain. I mean, look, Red Skull was killed in the original Captain America comic, brought back in issue 3. When you've got something good, hold on to it. Your IP is what's most important.
Bob, what he's talking about when he says IP, he means intellectual property.
When I was in the military, it meant you had one of those like hanging strings from a button.
No, I hear what you're saying, Rob. I mean, at the time, I owned a comic book store, and my customers all knew, my employees all knew I was a big Steve Rogers fan. And when this happened, they all came in and they were concerned for me, and they were like, how are you handling this? And I'm like, we all know he's going to be back. I mean, it's just a matter of when, And look, I went through all the different versions of Cap over the years, some bad writers, some bad artists, you know, uh, there's been Cap Wolf, there's been Armored Cap, there's been, you know, you name it, right? And eventually the Steve Rogers we know and love will come back. So I just have to wait my turn. And you're right.
Did
It's
you
kind
did
of a
you
running joke.
did you get nervous after a few months though, Rick? Because it took quite a long time.
I
Did you
no,
start to get a little nervous?
No, I had some theories towards the end because of they I talk about Alex Ross, right? You've got in the background there, Steve, and I think Rob, you got a shirt right with Alex Ross on there, right? Um, there was a there was a 12 issue miniseries that was um, looking at they had in I guess was it the invaders that came into modern time, right? And
Hmm.
at that point, there was Steve Rogers as Captain America in modern time. My theory, Bob, was that this was how they were going to bring Steve Rogers back from the dead. They were going to bring the Steve Rogers from World War II to modern time, and then he would stay, and then he would be a man out of time again.
That would have been
But
awesome.
that was my theory. That
Yeah.
was what I was thinking, but that didn't happen. But that's fine.
Yeah.
Ed Brubaker had his plan.
So, talk about your introduction again. You contrast Captain America with DC Superman. So, can you share with the listeners some of the characteristics or the qualities that you think distinguish these characters?
Both Captain America and Superman are noble characters. I really enjoyed the new Superman movie because it brought back the Boy Scout, Superman's light. But ultimately, Superman is associated with truth, justice in the American way, while Cap is truth, justice, and the American ideal. And so, even though there have been comics that try to distance Superman and turn him into a more of an international hero, for so many people, Superman still represents the Boy Scout, and Captain America's more like the general of an important platoon. Um, so if I don't know if I'm conveying exactly what I'm trying to say, but you know, Captain America edges Superman out just a little bit with the nobility, I think. But both of them are very similar in that respect. They want to do what's right, they want to do what's noble. Cap is dressed in an American flag. So, Captain America represents what is best about America. Now, with that being said, Captain America, does have his faults. He's not too perfect like Superman, a complaint that you sometimes hear about Superman as a character. Captain America, you know, has had problems. And I have to get this in. I simply loathe Nick Spencer. I think the whole Hydra cap was a slap in the face to every World War II veteran and every person that died in the concentration camps and in the cause against Nazism and fascism. Um, to me, that was a slap in the face to all the soldiers who fought in World War II.
So
To
you didn't
do
enjoy
that,
that arc. That's what
no, I loathe it.
okay.
So
And
Rob, can
I
you?
have not forgiven Nick Spencer for it, even though, suppose it wasn't the real Cap, to do that to such a fine character and turn him that evil um, is simply unforgivable in my view.
Mm.
So Rob, I think that's yeah. I mean, listen, it's a quite a controversial story, and there's more people who lean on the fact that they don't like it than do like it for sure. But you said something I've never heard before, and that is it's a slap in the face to all those POWs. Can you maybe tell a little bit more why?
Because Captain America represents America, and in particular, America in World War II. The greatest generation, all that stuff. And to turn Captain America into a Hitler like character is a slap in the face to those who died in the Holocaust, given that Simon and Kirby were both Jewish, and they intentionally made Captain America or Steve Rogers Captain America into the Aryan prototype, blonde hair, blue eyed kind of thing. So it just feels so wrong. And I think both Simon and Kirby would have been turning in their graves at what Nick Spencer did to the character. Um, I don't really count the Ultimate Cap. I don't care about the Ultimate Cap. Um, who who again is a bit on the morally gray side. You know, 616 Captain America and the MCU Captain America are both ideals and representations of America that are very positive in my view.
Man, we got to get together sometime and have a brewski and talk about Nick's run some more, because I hated that run when I first read it. I've learned to appreciate it for its subtleties, not for its in your face sort of thing. And I don't know. I have to concede that a mark of sometimes good writing is that it exercises a lot of passion. And clear, I see a lot of passion on your part. So
Yeah.
mission accomplished.
Yeah, we talk about that a little bit in our intro to the supervillain reader.
Mm-hmm.
And I say the same thing I just said now about it being a slap in the face to those who died for the Allied powers in World War II.
Well, I've been thinking about picking up that volume, and now you've convinced me. So I'm gonna have to pick up and read a little more in depth about this. Plus, it looks like an interesting title anyway. But speaking of titles, let's dive in to this book beyond just the dedication and the introduction. And in particular, I want to talk about the chapter that you contributed, chapter 7, which focuses it's in a section of the book on psychological profiles. So the book is broken into different sections, and this section deals with psychological profiles of Cap, and yours was titled 65 Years of Guilt Over the Death of Bucky. And in that chapter, you took a deep dive into his relationship, Bucky and Steve's relationship, and how Steve dealt with the apparent death of his teenage sidekick in the final days of World War II. So I'd like you to summarize your key points in some ways that you think Steve's behavior in the comics was influenced by, say, his survivor's guilt or the lingering impacts of that trauma that he experienced when he saw that drone explode with Bucky aboard. And you specifically note a couple areas. You talk about things like avoidance reality and exaggerated sense of responsibility. But I'd love to hear you talk more about that, because it really was, I think, a very, very interesting chapter.
Well, thank you. At the time, I worked very hard on that chapter and tried to, put some legitimacy to that concept of survivor's guilt. I mean, the first thing Cap says when he's, in Avengers 4 is Bucky, Bucky. And he's continually plagued by this guilt for Bucky's death. And the way that he kind of deals with it is you never get too close to anyone. And when Rick Jones puts on Bucky's costume, Cap is not happy with him initially. It was not a pleasant thing for him to see. Now, eventually, Cap came around and allowed Rick to fight alongside with him briefly, but it's that time and time again, when you look through the various stories, especially in the 1970s, and even throughout some of the 80s, and certainly in the 1960s when Stan was writing him, Cap is very protective about Bucky. He feels responsible for what Baron Zemo did and for Bucky's loss because, Bucky's what, 15, 16 years old? Although apparently in the Golden Age comics, he uses a gun a whole lot more than Cap does and has no qualms about killing Ratsies.
Right.
Ratsies.
Yeah.
but there was this bond between the two of them that was so strong, Cap couldn't let it go. Now, I have mixed emotions about the Winter Soldier. Again, I don't like dead characters being brought back to life, but I'll be the first to admit I'm wrong in this case.
Yeah.
The Winter Soldier is a pretty darn cool character,
Hmm.
I have to admit. And bringing Bucky back from the dead was done very well. So in this case, I'm wrong.
I mean, one of the things I really appreciated about the chapter that you contributed to this volume was you got me thinking about like Steve's behavior in different ways. Then, I mean, of course, we joke about it all the time. When Rick and I are going back and we're covering issues or stories from the '60s in particular, early '70s, mid '70s, late '70s, sometimes even in the '80s, in this exaggerated sense of responsibility that Steve. I mean, it was certainly he brought along a young man on the missions with him, right? And Bucky died, right? Or so it seems, right? And so yes, there is some responsibility, but it weighs on him, like an
Yes.
albatross, and we see that explicitly mentioned over and over and over again in the stories.
Yes, we do. And his enemies, um, like,
Dr. Faustus?
yeah, Dr. Faustus uses that against him during therapy. I think I didn't reread my chapter, so bear with me. Um, uh,
Right, and the
hint,
Red Skull uses it, right? I mean,
yeah, the
has a
Red Skull
robotic
uses it.
Everybody
version.
uses it at some
Everybody
point.
uses
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I mean, that's what's so obvious.
Well, and it's a great plot point to use.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that writers were able to take and say, wait a minute, we can play on Cap's survivor's guilt, which, was apparent from Avengers 4 onward, and, see what we can do creatively to have Cap's villains or have him mope about it. The villains use it against him and so forth.
It's interesting. I mean, in one way, I think you suggested maybe even Cap uses it against himself, right? So, at one point in your essay, you suggest that Steve continued to use Bucky's death as an excuse to keep people at a distance. And so
Yes,
it's an interesting insight because, throughout the decades, Steve has had difficulties in forming relationships, personal relationships. So, especially romantic partners, right? Like all the ones over the years. And he remains, for the most part, a loner,
a
right? Someone
loner.
who's part of the world, but often apart from it. And maybe you could talk about that.
Yes, from the very beginning, you know, Captain America, Steve Rogers felt as though, the whole man out of time trope. During the Avengers, Cap's Cookie Quartet, Hawkeye is constantly berating him, calling him Methuselah. Um, and Cap just shrugs it off, being the noble individual. He doesn't engage Hawkeye in any kind of banter back and forth when Hawkeye's throwing all that at him, which again I think was Stan Lee's way of showing just how noble Captain America is, that he's above such things. But deep down inside, Steve Rogers is the false face, and Captain America is the real person.
Mm.
While one could argue that Clark Kent is just as much Superman is Superman, or Bruce Wayne is just as much Batman. Uh, Steve Rogers is really the imposter,
Mm-hmm.
I think, in that regard. Now, with that being said, it, you know, that an interesting term that's bandied about today is imposter syndrome. And I think that for a long time, because of the death of Bucky, Captain America wrestled with, well, I'm supposed to represent the best of America, but am I truly worthy to do that? And I think that that's where um, we get the, some of the post traumatic stress syndrome or shell shock, uh, as it were, as it was called, during the Great War of World War One, which my grandfather fought in, and I have a whole collection of medals on my wall that my grandfather won. He also knew Al Capone.
All
Fun
right.
fact. Um, but
Uh, I,
the persona of Captain America, he's got to keep that momentum going as Captain America, and all of his attempts at trying to have relationships, companions. He's got plenty of friends, but do they really know him? Because I'm not sure
no.
Steve Rogers is actually knowable. Now, with that being said, my favorite is Bernie Rosenthal,
Hmm.
but of his potential partners, I just think she's cute, you know, and the banter that they had back and forth.
Yeah.
Rob, you
Um,
bring up a great point, and I haven't really thought about this before until this moment, and that is there's been plenty of writers that have agreed with you in the fact that Steve Rogers, the main persona is Captain America, not Steve Rogers, right?
yeah,
And so that I've heard before, and I tend to agree with, but I never really gave this much thought before. But perhaps maybe for all of the costumed heroes out there that, with dual identities, perhaps maybe Steve Rogers has the hardest part because the super soldier serum changed him. He doesn't take off the mask and go back to that 98-pound weakling.
no,
He,
he
he
doesn't.
he's always in the mirror, sees himself as the super soldier since that happened. And so unlike others who maybe take off their mask and can go back to how they were before, Steve can't. And that maybe that has something to do with it.
I think it does. Iron Man takes off the suit. He's Tony Stark. He has a completely separate personality, in some ways, than Iron Man. And so do many of the other characters, except, of course, the Fantastic Four, who
Hmm.
don't have a secret
Secret
identity.
identity.
Yeah.
You said something like, and I wrote it down because I want to think about this some more. And you use the term knowable. You use that word. That Steve Rogers knowable, and I think we have seen like over and over and over again throughout the decades that in many respects, much of him remains unknowable. One of the things I really liked about this chapter is it took an angle that that isn't really explicitly talked about a lot in the comics. We know that Steve has experienced trauma. He saw Bucky's loss. He saw what happened in World War II. He's seen terrible things, right? And he has this eidetic memory where he doesn't forget anything, right? We know that. Um, he carries an immense burden in those memories, and other than Faustus, and some other cats and dogs that have treated him along the way, he bears the burden of not having received therapy for any of this. And I know, in the 60s and 70s, they didn't really talk about that sort of thing. We're much more sensitive to that to now, but he really does continue to struggle with a lot. And as Rick mentioned in his question, we see this with his relationships. Superman, he has a relationship. He's managed to, maintain a fairly consistent, healthy relationship with Lois, right? Lois Lane. And yet Steve has a very difficult time transitioning to Steve from Cap.
he does have a very difficult time, and I think really the Steve Rogers persona is not him. He tries to have a normal life, but it just doesn't work because Captain America is Captain America,
Mm.
period. And
Yeah.
Steve Rogers is like this false identity. I mean, I did like the fact that, he took up painting to try to pass the time away, as it were. Um, which is
Mm.
kind of cool to be creative like that. But you Steve's never been able to hold on to a regular job like maybe some of the other characters, Peter Parker or
Sure. Iron Man, right? Or
yeah,
yeah,
Iron
sure.
Man,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and so forth. So, you know,
Yeah, interesting. I like to pull that thread a little bit more because, in addition to the survivor's guilt, you do mention PTSD in your article, and it got me thinking because, of course, when you go back to the '60s and the '70s when this was really prevalent, the main creative teams were Kirby and Stan Lee, and both of them had served in the army during World War II. And while Stan didn't really see any I think combat time or overseas time, Kirby certainly did. He served with General Patton's Third Army in Europe, and he was a reconnaissance scout. Presumably, he saw some pretty terrible things. And I have to think that maybe some of what we see in the character of Steve Rogers, particularly in those early days that they were writing, was laid down really the foundation from sort of a therapy from Kirby. I don't know if anybody's ever explored that. I know he has talked about his experiences in some of the interviews, but I'm not sure anybody's really explored that connection of maybe that was a little bit of an outlet for him.
well, we always often associate Kirby with the Thing, but I think there's another side of that because Kirby was a um, tremendous patriotic American, and he believed in America and its principles. And I think that you could see as much as could be told some of the ways Kirby was challenge, channeling some of that World War II experience into the stories of Captain America that him and Lee put together. And then in the 1970s with stories like Mad Bomb and the bicentennial battles, again, you see Kirby um, wrestling with what it means to be un American. And especially in Mad Bomb or, in the bicentennial battles, we see different versions of Captain America throughout history in a positive way, going back to the Revolutionary era. So, yeah, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that some of the writing, um, obviously, they couldn't be like EC's war
Mm.
comics of the 1950s because of the comics code, but that some of that was certainly Kirby um, dealing with his own World War II experiences.
So I want to get back to my previous question about, Steve and Bob mentioned, being not knowable. He's has issues with his personal relationships, right? And you raise an interesting point in your essay about how Cap's villains pretty much understand Steve better than his own friends and colleagues. And you give a great example of this from Captain America 297, which is written by J.M. DeMatteis, of the Red Skull getting Cap perhaps better than almost anyone else. Um, and it seems, I don't know, I mean, it is a little paradoxical, right? That a villain might know Steve better than those closest to him. Can you talk about this realization?
Actually, I don't think that's unique. I think Magneto knows Xavier better than any of the X-Men. Dr. Doom knows Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, better. The Mandarin knows Tony Stark, Iron Man, better than his closest colleagues. So, Cap and the Skull, Red Skull, have been at it for so long that the Red Skull understands how to get underneath Captain America, Steve Rogers, to hurt him at his most vulnerable. And I think that, it's a typical trope that many hero villain relationships start out as friendships and then go, sour. But the villains, oftentimes, I think, obviously, for a number of reasons, like Doc Ock knows Spider Man better and the Kingpin knows Daredevil. That's not unique. When you've had this back and forth for, you know, almost 90 years now, there's, you're going to know um, your adversary quite well. And I think the Red Skull understood that just the way, the Joker knows Batman far better than Bruce Wayne knows Batman. I think in a lot of ways, even though the Joker is always trying to get Batman's attention,
Yeah.
due to his own insecurities, I suppose. But um,
I guess it relates back to these villains maybe have almost like obsessions with the heroes, so therefore they're going to study and learn more about them.
they do have obsessions, but that's what makes great storytelling. A hero oftentimes is only as good as the villain. You know, Villains are proactive and heroes are reactive to whatever the villain's doing. So to write villains well, you have to have the villain know the heroic protagonist almost better than their family members in order to write a compelling narrative. I think that's true for, any kind of writing, actually, but in particular for comics.
Well, there is the Chinese maxim of war from Xuan Tzu, right? If you know your enemy and you know yourself, you do not have to fear in 1,000 battles. So yeah,
Yes,
right. So
it
there you
goes
have
back
it.
it goes back a long way.
Right.
So James DeMatteis, I'm sorry, DeMatteis wrote the afterword for
Oh,
this
by the way,
volume.
I just want to say, Steve, interrupt you. Sorry, Rob. It warmed my heart, but you called him Dan Mateus because we actually had him on the show way like 4 or 5 years ago, and that's how he said his name. And so every time I've always said his name, and then we'd have other guests on the show, Jim Shooter, and some other people, and they're like, "What are you talking about? It's DeMatteis or whatever." And so I am so happy that you said his name correctly, Rob.
He's a big hero of mine. I've read a lot of his work.
Oh, don't get.
Um,
Let's ask Steve. Have Steve ask his question first, and then have you get to like your relationship with him.
Okay, no, that's great. So in the afterword, he called Steve Rogers the George Bailey of superheroes, which really warmed my heart because that's my favorite Christmas movie. But so that alone makes this book worth picking up because it offers some detail on DeMatteis's aborted vision for retiring Steve Rogers as Captain America after the Captain America number 300 and replacing him with Jesse Blackcrow as a Native American Cap. So Rick and Bob spoke with JM about this back in episode 13. So how did you get JM to be a part of this project?
All I remember is somehow I got a hold of his email and I just asked him if he'd be willing to write an afterward. And he said, sure.
That was it. That's easy.
It was that easy, you know. I've met him a few times. I don't think he knew I was actually the same guy that asked him to write the afterword, because it was a few years after that. But his work has been tremendously impactful on me, both his superhero work and his works like Brooklyn Dreams and some of the others. I think he's one of the greatest writers in comics and animation based on comics the world has ever produced.
What do you find so impactful in from James' work that's so meaningful to you?
Well, that's like, you know, one of the greatest Spider-Man tales is Craven's Last Hunt.
Yeah.
One of the greatest Batman tales is Going Sane, where the Joker takes off the makeup and is trying to live a sane life.
Mm.
He gets underneath these characters, and the idea that he wanted to replace Cap with a Native American Captain America seems quite appropriate to me, you know, given sort of the difficult history between, you know, the U.S. and Native Americans um, throughout. There's a beautiful irony conceptually in that, and I think it would have worked. But you know, they did the Dark Phoenix saga, and then Shooter says we have to bring Jean Grey back a couple of years later. So there's no way that we're going to let him do this. Even though I think Marvel should have taken the chance for something new. Steve Rogers, as we know, can always come back.
That's true. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that would have been fun. Hey, I got
It
to
would have been fun.
I got to tell you, Rob, I thoroughly enjoyed this volume of essays, and you know, I always get something out of critical studies of characters, particularly one as near and dear to my heart as Cap. And so, I just want to tell you that I've had that book for a long time, and I've read it a number of times, and I was glad to pick it up again in preparation for today's interview with you. But I got to ask you one more question, because this one. It really excited me when I heard about it. So I heard that several years ago, I think it was back around 2014, maybe at the Denver Comic Con, you had the opportunity to moderate a panel that had Alan Bellman on it. So and at that time, he was one of the, if not the last, remaining Golden Age creators that had worked on Captain America comics and several other timely titles as well. In fact, probably nearly a dozen of them. And of course, he passed in 2020 at the age of 95. And so I got to ask you, what was that like to be able to sit there and talk with a guy who has seen history? In fact, he wrote about it in his memoir, Timely Confidential. But again, like, how did that happen? And what was that like?
Well, I knew the organizer of the Denver Comic Con, Christina Angel, at the time, and she asked if I wanted to moderate a panel with Alan Bellman, one of the last Golden Age timely artists, you know, in particular notable for his work on Captain America. And, you know, so we had a great interview back and forth to this panel that was standing room only. And I remember two things distinctly from that interview. One was that his first wife had an opportunity to sign Bruce Springsteen and turned it down before John Hammond and got a hold of him in Columbia Records and all that stuff. But that there was some you know, connection that where Springsteen was turned down. I don't remember the specifics that his wife had something to do with. The other was this girl came up to Mr. Bellman and was in tears. Um, I don't think she knew why she was crying. She was just happy to be in the presence of somebody who had worked on Captain America. And Mr. Bellman was so gracious and was like, "What can I do for you? How can I help you? You know, I'm very happy that you're here." He was a true gentleman and a true American. Um, and we were both wearing cap ties, and I had him sign a crystal knot Captain America. What if Captain portrait that he did was the crystal knot, which kind of
Yep.
started, World War II, and one could argue, or at least the persecutions and anti-Semitism, bringing it to a full, like in your face crystal
Right.
knot. And he also signed a couple other covers that I had made copies of that he had worked on for Captain America. So
He
I met him a number of times after that, and was just a tremendously gracious and kind individual. And I'm so grateful um, that he was able to have a second, a third, or fourth career, actually, going to cons and being recognized
mm,
for his work. Um, Thanks to Dr. Michael J. Velasco. Is that right? Is that how you say his name?
I have no
Um,
idea.
yeah, I'm not familiar.
He's the one who brought Alan Bellman back to
Okay.
prominence, and works on all those Atlas and Timely
Okay.
collections.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I pronounced his name correctly. I'm horrible with
Yeah.
pronunciations. It's a fault of my own. I
Unless it's
admit it.
Dan Mateus and you
That,
nail it.
that's a
Yeah.
professor. That's a professor thing. I think I'm a professor as well. And I just go, hey, sweater guy. And hey, backpack, that sort of thing. Cause I can't remember names or pronounce them. So.
Well, speaking professor in school, Rob, what are you working on now? Is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners?
Sure. I actually also teach a class on the Marvel universe and the DC universe. So, an honors class. We have under peer review a book on of critical essays on Alex Ross.
Hmm.
Wow. Interesting.
I think there's a lot more critical work that can be done with specific artists and writers, whether it's Lynn Wein or Alex Schoenberg.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Yes, I love Schoenberg,
Yeah.
by the way. His work is amazing. And I found it interesting that when he redid, what was it, Giant Size Invaders,
Yeah.
that there was some blood on the cover and the Comics Code told him to take it off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, of the Invaders. So and I'm also working on co-editing a book about the villains of Spider-Man, and another book that I'm co-editing with a different academic is a book on the Silver Surfer.
Very
Interesting.
But
cool.
but we haven't seen a lot of submissions for that yet.
Mhm.
So if you're interested in writing about the Silver Surfer, look around the internet to find the call for papers.
All right. Well, if you get to the villains of Captain America or the bad guys of Captain, let me know because I have dibs on Doughboy.
Okay.
He
Yeah,
does.
I think that
It
would be a great book,
would
actually.
be awesome, actually.
Yeah, people I think would get the wrong idea of what they're picking up. in a book about dough. So Rob, if listeners want to check out some of your other work, do you have a website we can direct them to?
No, not really. You can find the works on Amazon. I've, done books on James Bond, done books on um, libraries and librarians in comics and graphic novels. Um,
A lot of music books too, right?
Yeah, several on the Grateful Dead, and I've published about West Texas music, have been in a number of documentaries. You can check out, however, related to Marvel, the Icons Unearthed Marvel. I was interviewed for that documentary series, and I'm more than happy to talk Marvel, Captain America, Silver Surfer, Magneto, Spider-Man. Uh, for hours and hours.
So our listeners can probably just put in Robert G. Weiner in Google and find all the different works that you've been on, but none less important to us than Captain America and the struggle of the superhero. So make sure everybody checks that out.
Yeah, I'm really proud of this book. Again, it was my way of kind of giving the middle finger to my friends who said Captain America was nothing more than a government stooge, that he has no personality, that he has nothing redeeming about him, and that he's a ridiculous superhero. And I'm like, no, no, you don't understand. Captain America is one of the noblest heroes and one of the most important in the history of American comics. And literally, he represents America and what's best about America.
That volume does put the lie to that claim, right? That he's not relevant. It's a fantastic collection of essays, and we just scratched the surface with really your contribution. There's another 16 essays in there, critical essays that for folks to enjoy, plus some additional material as well.
Well, and if you're interested, Captain America was the first Marvel character to have uh, a filmic version with the serial from the 1940s. Now, it's not true to the character, but in my Marvel comics into film, David Carter writes an essay about that Captain America um, series, serial.
Well,
So,
I believe it's a Grant Gardner instead of Steve Rogers, if I remember
yeah,
correctly.
Grant Gardner. Although the great Lionel Atwill, who is known for playing good villains, is the villain in it. So, he's always great in everything he does, even though he was in a lot of bad cinema.
well,
Lionel
Rob,
Atwill is always great to watch.
well, Rob, we just want to say thank you so much for taking some time to come on to the show. We really do appreciate it. It's been a pleasure wrapping cap with you.
Yes, thank you. Rapping with Cap. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a lot of fun having Rob Weiner on the show. I always love having those conversations with someone who knows the character so intimately. Like I said, it got me thinking when he mentioned the whole that Steve Rogers is not the real character, Captain America's real character, and it got me thinking about, well, it's probably because when he looks in the mirror, he still sees Captain America, right? He can't go back to being that scrawny Steve. Anyway, I love those types of conversations.
Yeah, I think you're right, Rick. I mean, it got me thinking too about like when he said, is he knowable, right? Because Steve compartmentalizes, and he compartmentalizes for all sorts of reasons. Of course, he compartmentalizes because he's got his professional life, right? But his personal life is very compartmentalized. And if you think about all the people who know him, who are friends with him, who have been lovers with him, like how well do they really know like his deepest, darkest secrets and his fears and his, all those sorts of things? Because he keeps it very, very locked up. And I think the book, and particularly Rob's chapter in the book, whether it was intentional or not, or whether it was just happy circumstance of this is how the writers wrote it, it does seem like a lot of this could be because of some trauma, right? Now we
Hmm.
recognize that more these days. So it's just an interesting way to think about the character, even if it wasn't necessarily intentional.
I agree.
He tries so hard to have a personal life. He's been a cop. He's been an artist, but just somehow, other than being an Avenger, nothing ever sticks. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, Steve, what'd you think of joining the show and being our first time we've ever had someone be a third interviewer on the show? You have that honor. What'd you think about the experience?
you guys made it easy. I mean, this was really a great experience. Um, this is really the only podcast that I listen to regularly. So I feel like I know you guys personally, and I appreciate how much help you've put into getting this put together, and it's been a lot of fun.
Well, it has been, and we've loved having you on the show, Steve, and getting to know you a little better. Have the listeners get to know you a little bit better. So, and now it's for the ages, right?
It's true.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah. Now we can say that we actually had Steve Rogers on the show and had a conversation with him.
Go. All right.
Yeah, that sounds like a Rick's the marketing guy. I can see the wheels turning already. So,
Yeah, well, I'm gonna I'm gonna hashtag the heck out of this, but everything. Anyway, this is gonna have the record for the most first 60 seconds of any episode we had, and then the drop off.
I bet that's true.
We're just teasing.
yeah.
In our world, if we tease you, we love you, Steve. So
Yeah.
thank you very
Yeah,
much for
thank
being
you.
on the show, and thank you
My
for
pleasure.
introducing us to Rob.
Sure. Oh, yeah, that was great. Very, very interesting and educational.
And if we have that book, that forthcoming book on the villains or bad guys of Captain America, everybody will know it started here.
Started here. That's
Yeah,
right.
so.
Thanks for the suggestion.
All right, so Bob, next episode we're going to come back and we are going to complete the Nomad storyline, the Steve Englehart storyline that has started. We started with the um, uh, Secret Empire, and then we went into the Nomad series, and so this is part 8 of that, and we're going to finish that up next episode. So everybody, make sure you come back for that.
It's going to be great, as always.
Can't wait.
All right. For Steve Rogers, Bob Lucius, and me, Rick Verbanis, we thank you for listening to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.